Hi, Mackie. Hi, Jim. I don't think Wenjing or Stephen are here today, and I'm not sure about Eric either. So um, it may be that we're just a really. Oh, here's Drummond. Excellent. Hi, Drummond.
Nikki, how are you?
All good. I was just saying I don't think Wenjing or Stephen are here today, and I'm not sure about Eric. So. I don't think I'll just check on the wiki, but I don't think anything's been prepared for today.
I think Aunt Wenjing is still on vacation, as I
Yeah.
understand. So I would tend to agree. And as usual, I'm on my iPad because I have to have breakfast sometimes on Thursday morning, and the 4 hours of Trust RP meetings we have in a row on Thursdays, at least that I have on my schedule on Thursdays.
Yeah, Eric just joined. Maybe you'd like to provide any updates.
Hi guys. Uh Sorry I'm late. Are we without wenching again?
Yes,
Okay.
that appears to be the case.
Okay. And Stephen, and yeah. I do have one update, which is unfortunate. The time that we had put the task force has now I've now got a weekly meeting, work meeting that is been put in that exact same time slot on Tuesdays. And it's um and so I'm looking at my calendar, and every decent afternoon time Europe is taken except Friday. And so I'm wondering if it's going to be if most of the task force members are going to be in Europe, maybe we just do it super early and like 2 p.m. or something, or morning. So I don't know if that works for you, Nikki, or Maki or anybody else, but it's just the current time, which is Tuesdays at 3 p.m. UK, 4 p.m. Europe, are no longer available. So maybe I'll just do another poll.
Sorry, I was trying to copy over the meeting,
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
meeting page in the wiki.
All right.
Um, Sorry, can you repeat what's
Yeah. Sorry.
proposing?
The task force that we set up for Tuesdays, the trustworthy AI agent
Yeah, I
task force.
got that you couldn't make that time.
But I've now got for work project, I've got every single Tuesday, like we've got 2 hour meetings that
Block
are,
session.
yeah.
So you're looking for another day in the week.
Yeah.
Well,
And
not
so, yeah,
Thursday, as
exactly.
per what Drummond said.
Thursdays are packed. Wednesdays I can't do. Tuesdays now I can't do. And might be a Monday, but the times that works, yeah, so it could be Monday. So maybe I'll try that Monday and see if that works for.
Yeah, that sounds like good way
Okay.
to start the week.
Yeah, yeah,
And we can always, just have a more, a more a slower cadence, as it were,
yeah.
and do if we're structured in how we do our um in how we do
It's
our
partition.
asynchronous work,
Yeah, yeah.
And I was looking through different charters yesterday, and I noticed one for did skid I was looking at, and they worked entirely asynchronously and just did updates in the working group session.
Yeah,
So that's another option. Maybe once we've just spent a bit of concentrated time
yeah.
and kind of divvied up the workloads, then we could just have like a once a month meeting or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, we need to get it kicked off because there's quite a lot of work that's been done. And now it's
Exactly. We need to get
yeah,
into your head, Eric.
yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
hopefully not too scary a place to be, but
Oh no, it's very
yeah, so,
well.
otherwise, we spend our life in meetings and don't do any work.
Yeah. And yeah, so Maki, that would be, and then I'd have to ask Carly to move a meeting. But I think it would be 3 p.m. What is 3 p.m. UK, 4 p.m. Europe? What is that? Let's see. 3 p.m. So let me put in. I think that's 10, Maki. 10 a.m. Eastern.
Still could be manageable, I think.
Okay. But yeah, all right. So maybe I'll just try to do that. I'll reach out to Min and ask her to move that on the calendar. And then we're off. This time for real. But yeah, so I guess we don't have an agenda for today and not many updates. So we could just either cancel or talk about what's on people's minds. I'm going to Oslo on the 28th for a UN governance, AI and digitization governance conference. I don't know what it's all about, but I always find it interesting that Europe is still trying to push forward with all of
A
their.
UN, what's it about, Eric?
It's called. Let me send it to you. UNDP. I have no idea what this is. You know, what's going to come out of this, but was invited, and let me find it. Here, I'll put it in the chat. UNDP New Ways of Governing Conference in Oslo. And there are 4 tracks: governing digital and AI at country level. So you guys are probably familiar with the digital sovereignty movement. And so that's really front of mind in Europe. I don't think it's front of mind in the US. But so they're trying to figure out, all right, how do we do it at a country level? The Europe's talking about European digital sovereignty in the Euro stack, but each country also needs to figure out where they stand on governing digital and AI. Let me share my screen. All right, yeah, no.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and so yeah, there's 4 themes: governing digital and AI, and that's what I've been invited for. And then there's evidence-based policymaking, democratic innovation, and then governance and public finance for sustainable development goals. So I've never been involved with this or been invited to any of the other conferences. So I'm going in eyes wide open but I think it's good to get some of these contacts. Hi, Jim.
Yeah, I took a look at the agenda for that conference. The one thing that does stick out, you're right, the US is not focused on, in a sense, I'll call it sovereign governance of AI, so to speak, or digital systems,
Yeah.
because they just assume we're the default.
Yes.
So you're right about that. We're really low on the scale of like, that's not a high fear. But the other side of it is what's really great about the fact that everybody else is now thinking that way is it means that there's no longer a false assumption that, oh yeah, this will all get worked out at some super macro level like the UN or the EU.
Hmm.
No, you're going to be setting your own rules, you're going to have your own challenges, and you need to be able to do your own governance in a sense, which is actually I'll call it a healthy step forward.
Yeah.
Much like the tariff wars, it's going to lead to what I call better negotiations, where, in a sense, each stakeholder group or country, in a sense, represents its own, yeah, I'll call it needs better. And it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that there's not collaboration on architecture and concepts, strategies, standards, and all that. But the fact that you have stronger representation of each group is probably a healthy thing.
I agree. I will,
Definitely.
yeah,
Definitely agree with that.
yeah.
Sounds a lot like the same discussion that John Phillips is having at the UN on trust registries.
Yeah.
How do I trust your trust registry? That's up to each nation state.
Yep.
Mm.
But you can have an overall governance saying, well, if you don't meet certain criteria, then we're going to doubt your quality of your trust registries.
Just signed up for a webinar from Microsoft. So Microsoft is very, they're in tune with all these narratives, and they're like, we offer a sovereign cloud. And so, so the countries are like, we need to extract ourselves, decouple from big tech. What are our options? And we don't have many options. And so, big tech says, well, we'll give you options. You can have your own sovereign data cloud, and we can, show you how to do it. But there's a lot of movement to say the data stays in the country, it never leaves, or if it leaves, it's very tightly controlled, or at least specific types of data. And then with all the data centers that are being built and all the compute needs, where are these data centers being built, and whose data are they using? And then uh, Jensen Huang obviously talks about, he says every country should own their own intelligence, meaning their own AI. And so he's pushing that narrative, I think, to sell chips to everybody, to every country individually. But
Yes.
but in some senses he's right. Yeah. And we're having this conversation with the team in Bhutan. If you're a Bhutanese citizen and you type into Chat GPT, what is my what is a something for my culture look like? Chat GPT may not know, because they don't have enough data from that specific culture to reflect back what a traditional meal looks like, or traditional clothes, or anything like that. And so, trying to say, listen, if my citizens are going to be using these tools for information, I want my values to also be part of the return answers. But how do we do that rather than
Yes.
just sorry.
Yeah, what the questions you're raising, Eric, to me,
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
guess it's my own personal problems. But I would say they lead me to what I think about architecture for
Mhm.
solutions. Do you know what I mean? So
Mhm.
most of these things have I'll call it a fairly strong model that you can propose from an architecture viewpoint that address those kind of concerns. And
Mhm.
I don't see those models developing like in the EU, for what I can see, through a NATPA and some of the other organizations, or certainly not in the US, because like I say, we're the default to everything. We just assume, hey, don't worry about it. We got it covered. So we don't need those models that separate the separation of concerns, I'll say, that
Mhm.
is necessary to solve these problems in I'll call it a flexible, efficient way
Mhm.
that allows different groups to, in a sense, I'll call it manage their own concerns
Mhm.
in what I call common systems. And it doesn't matter that you separate anything, like you're pointing out. You can say, here's Bhutan or whoever it is, Congo, pick anybody. But the bigger problem is, guess what? Much like the trade systems, nothing works if they don't all interoperate anyway.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I think also it depends on the type of data you're feeding at the end of the day to those large language models. So I think it depends on the appetite of each nation on how big they would want to go about, sharing some of those initial inputs that would help you, um, get away from biases and stuff like that. So I think maybe the US is, like a pioneer in this in terms of feeding those large language models. I would say mostly on an open source basis versus, like closed ecosystems where there's lack of information sharing, and you find those difficulties on how, to get a local view of an LLM.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think again with this what I call multi-agent architecture and agent-to-agent protocol, model context protocol, all of those architecture building blocks, it's
Mhm.
not hard to build architectures that not just support the idea of here's, different sovereign, I'll call it instances, if you will, that operate independently and have their own control, not just over the data and the training of the LLM and the governance and all that, but more importantly, actually the flexibility to go beyond that and say it's a multi-level problem. So you can say, well, there's, I'll call it sovereign governance at one level. There's maybe global governance under that, but you can have specific domain governance or company governance above that as well. And all of those, in a sense, capabilities need to be stacked in a sense
Mhm.
when you access something, sort of like a tiers and layers architecture model.
Yeah, I think that's the the first step. People are saying Eurostack, and then they've got a pretty good diagram what the Eurostack is. But yeah, what within that stack is, are you able to say, well, this I need to sort of change my vendor, or change um, find an alternative, or this I just need to reaffirm the policy that, okay, you're providing the service, but we need to make it more aligned with our needs. There's this, so yeah, going through that process of saying, what actually can we do? The Swiss have built an LLM that's developed on public infrastructure, and it's supposed to be for them. I'm trying to find that link, and I think in Dubai, or somewhere else they're doing it as well. So I do know that there is a trend for countries to say we need to sort of get a handle on our own LLMs. Where is it?
Yeah, there's a problem that hasn't really, sorry, we have problems in the real world all the time. Not all problems get focus. And sometimes when I look at things, I'll say some problems don't have heavy focus yet, but will have heavier my forecast, like a guy predicting that, whatever Microsoft stock will triple in the next 2 years. I look at problems like that and say, ooh, the importance of a given problem space may triple in 2 years. And for me, um, we talk about a lot of things. And actually, to be fair, the whole trust space is good. I'll throw all trust, security, privacy, confidentiality, governance, boom, all that goes to me underneath trust. And
Hmm.
guess what? There's a bigger problem. Trust is a component of something larger, which is that, in a sense, anything can fail to operate as specified, which in itself is not really, I'll call it those trust domains I just mentioned. It's sort of a bigger space. And so I just came from a healthcare conference in Boston, which was on convergence of AI, blockchain, and healthcare. And there was some really great stuff, really impressive stuff, where they're using verifiable credentials to control data, packets, that kind of stuff, and access what the role is you would have with that data packet kind of thing, not just the simple privacy confidentiality. Bigger thing was I recognized in the problems they were dealing with, we have, from an operations perspective, there wasn't heavyweight on the operation problems. So to your point, the concept of, gee, we need to do something about sovereign governance and control over AI resources and services, fine. But bigger than that was the concept that there's something like, instead of zero trust, I'll call it zero faith architecture,
Hmm.
which says anything can fail. And there's a whole set of dimensions on how you measure that from an operations perspective that
Hmm.
doesn't have heavy focus today.
Hmm.
But if you, and most of these things really aren't well anticipated, I'll say.
Yeah.
Best example is, think of like the CrowdStrike failure at Microsoft.
Mhm.
Everybody's happy with Microsoft as a tier one awesome provider. In reality, it was their failure that all CrowdStrike did was hit the key that opened that door.
Mhm.
Having been the guy that went through that same door 25 years earlier with
Mhm.
IBM,
Mhm.
I was the guy that put the key in the door that opened up the same problem. You have a different appreciation in life for those operational, I'll call it gaps. And to your point, when, 5 years from now, when some massive data center in Antarctica fails,
Mhm.
They'll say, gee, I wonder if that was preventable. But my concept is that something called zero faith architecture can address those gaps.
That's, the operational side. I think uh, it's a new term, zero faith. Um, yeah, and
Can you speak a little bit more about the differences between zero trust and zero faith?
So zero trust is everything that you understand it to be and where it applies. So reach out and go everywhere with that. So, the idea of, I'll call it verifiable credentials, consent management, a mutable history of all of that kind of stuff, those are all sort of under that umbrella. But the zero faith thing says, wait a second. The perfect example is the Microsoft CrowdStrike problem, where you've got this massive, global thing called Microsoft that smiles and guarantees that whatever you pay, they're going to make everything perfect. And in reality, all of these things have gaps. And so, having been the guy on the front line managing these gaps for Fidelity or other companies, I had those responsibilities. And so, actually, for a large U.S. insurance company, um, I was the guy that had to integrate data across all of their network. And I was using standard IBM stuff, just like CrowdStrike did with Microsoft. And the trick was um, there was just like CrowdStrike, there was a mistake in the operating system that IBM had made that nobody else had hit. And so what had happened was I'll call it that same spot or capability in the operating system feature, if you will, it ran thousands of times without failing. But the one time I launched it for a production deployment, it blew up just like CrowdStrike. And the network, just like CrowdStrike, was in a sense down. You couldn't get it back. So I went through that whole thing of being the operations guy that says, ooh, you're the guy in charge. You figured this stuff out. Bring our whole national network back. Thinking about that, there were two things that could have been done radically differently. Fidelity did one of them, which is the prevention side of it, which says, gee, can you guarantee me that the entire network end to end is fault tolerant? Okay, so we did do that at Fidelity. But the second side of that is that when you look at these stacks that everybody talks about, everything in the stack has I'll call it a statistical or a quality history behind it. How
Mhm.
reliable is that component? And somebody will say, oh, my component that you're using for DNS lookups or something is 99.99% reliable. Excellent. So that means it hardly ever goes out. But the problem is when you run something, whatever you're running, it's running on a stack that probably hits 10 different things that are
Mhm.
all each have that level of reliability. The
Dependency.
problem is there's not even a concept for something called aggregated service reliability. So Microsoft doesn't look at this, Google doesn't, IBM doesn't, nobody does. And the answer is if you're the poor guy like me stuck operating this crap, it's the aggregated service reliability that really matters. And that
Mhm.
should be policy managed. We could use smart AI to handle it, but all of that stuff is operational stuff that's just out of scope. So it's
Yeah.
it's in Jim's pile of what's not going to happen for the next 3 years till, like I say, that new data center in Antarctica fails because of a CrowdStrike update.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Jim,
Aggregated
I couldn't
service.
agree more. I really think this is, and it's the thing I spend most of my free, in inverted commas, time thinking about is that end-to-end digital supply chain and being able to have like a signals network over the top, trust metrics over the top that give you the indicators so that if you're in a SOC or a knock, you can respond, you can recover, all the usual stuff, but you can recognize what's going on and have like the digital product passport for, real world goods. You can have that on your transaction contextually at this time, you know, to what extent, what level of risk, given my risk appetite and so forth, am I undertaking now in this transaction? And what kind of traceability have I got down that digital supply chain? Um, so you described it very eloquently, and I heartily agree. as Drummond knows, I've been obsessing about this idea of trust signals or trust metrics, like the because we have so much data now, in so many different systems. But that in itself is a problem, that the heterogeneity of that data, the data quality, the amount of data that's dark data, and what we need is a signaling system,
Well, and
across
tied to
for
that,
trust across the internet.
right, tied to your signaling concept or event storms or networks, those kind of things, is the idea that you both have criticality and prioritization based on impact, that decides for you intelligently, dynamically, hey, where are you going to look? 10 things went wrong last second. Which one are you going to look at? Ooh, well, which one has what impacts? We have to do an impact analysis. Oh, I'll take, 7 and 9. Those are the two that I need to focus on. The others can wait based on criticality.
Exactly. And that's very contextual, but equally we need some common bases for measurement. So I've in the last couple of weeks been examining a not a very nice subject, but the subject of child exploitation and sexual abuse online. And I've been looking at the figures that the platforms publish in terms of incidents, reports to law enforcement, content moderation events, and things like that. And it's an absolute mess. So I did do some analysis with the help of my trusty AI assistant and a bit of research into sort of ESG and transparency reports. And the figures are really shocking when you bring it down to the risk to children online. If you've got a child that's using one of these platforms, what's the risk of their exposure? And my main takeaway from that analysis is number one, we're measuring the wrong stuff, or these platforms are measuring the wrong stuff. And number two, we need a common set. We all need to be able to measure this stuff in a common way, because that like the harms to kids that are arising are really shocking. And they're going to be the people deciding on our elder care when you and I are old and crusty. So disturbed, traumatized children lead to disturbed adults. So I think we've got some self-interest in kind of getting this kind of thing right. And there are less controversial, but more mundane things that we could measure consistently and really up the ecosystem's ability to have that kind of collective resilience.
Yeah, you're focused on some, I'll call it very important problems, much more so than a lot of other problems. And I've lived through some of those. As a 90 credits a child cycle, all that garbage, but more importantly, kindergarten teacher, house parent for juvenile delinquents, a million other roles I've had that are, people oriented, going through all those kinds of situations that you're confronted with, that you're trying to solve. And yeah, the importance of getting those right is a big, big deal, for sure. And that's a challenge. Um, that whole concept, you're right, forget my context before, but the whole point of being able to prioritize dynamically, intelligently, reprioritize instantly as needed is critical. That's exactly what a policeman does on the street. When somebody's stealing your purse, but somebody else is getting shot, he reprioritizes right in that moment. And smart systems need to have that same ability, if that makes sense.
And we can do it with AI. Every
Yeah. Yeah,
every time I
you
hear
forgot.
somebody say
All
we
right, I'm
can,
looking. Yeah, thanks a lot. But I'm looking in chat and I don't see the link over here yet. Thanks.
which like,
Yeah, the one that lets me do it with Smart AI
all
today.
right, yeah, I know. Well, that's the thing is
Yeah,
every time
just
I
please post that because I'll follow up on that link right away.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
everybody talks about we can solve cancer. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Oh, but sorry, we can't give you that information.
Actually, the funny part is some of these, well, to be very fair, the win for, I'll call it LLM, it's an interesting thing. One of the wins of, I'll call it Gen AI, I'll call it I'll call it democratization, where it's available to everybody for next to nothing, is a big thing. It's more pair of eyes. It's much like Google Earth. How many ancient civilizations have they discovered because Google Earth is now publishing all these photos? And before, when it was only archaeologists or university professors or researchers looking at this stuff, not a lot of stuff was found. The second you say, hey, to the 3 billion people online, hey, take a look at these photos, all of a sudden we discover a lot. And so in a sense, Gen AI, whatever its flaws are, the fact that it's highly available is a massive win in the short term because it just means millions of people are asking the same questions and
Mm,
comparing their answers instead of a few
mm,
people, which is a
mm,
good thing, I think.
mm.
But
Yeah.
as we all know, you need to know 85% of what the answer really is to be able to ask the right questions. So,
Uh-huh. Yeah, there's nothing easy about asking the right questions. And you're right, it's a process. It's not a single question for sure.
Mm,
And then actually, it right goes back to the whole trust over IP problem. So when I ask AI questions, I'm just saying, wait a second. First thing is, how critical is the answer to this question? How important is it? If it's important, guess what? I don't trust any of them. Zero faith architecture for important stuff. Nope. I've got to ask the same question through multiple channels. And then I've got to do what I call consolidation, reconciliation, and consensus to get to what I call a workable answer at best, if that makes sense.
mm. Well, Jeff said that, yeah, crowdsourcing produces both polarized interpretations as well as consensus. And that sprung into my head as well, because when we were told that, the World Wide Web is going to join us all together, and in some ways, maybe it's just social media has been dividing, and these prediction markets that are popping up. And I'm wondering, I mean, it's still early days in the prediction markets, and I'm wondering, um, you how they'll evolve and how valuable they are, there's a sense that prediction markets, they're not regulated, and so there's no insider information. And so if you've got insider information and you're making a big bet, then then hopefully that will lead to more accurate predictions because you're not withholding that information. So I think I'm wondering how the prediction markets in AI and the joining of human input with AI, how that's all going to work out in these prediction markets.
Yeah, good point. The thing I posted over 50 years ago, that guy wrote that thing. I read it. And 50 years ago, I'll call it the zero faith concepts were
Mhm.
formed probably really well in that two-page article. Um, so it's there's not many things you read that say, whoa, that really hit me, but that particular one was it for sure.
Thanks for that. The other thing that when we're talking about the digital sovereignty and what can a country do? In the end, it's just you're talking about 25-year problems, and you're talking about it's very pragmatic in the sense of I don't have the capital to build a new data center, to build my own AI model. I don't have the human capacity. So in my country, we just don't have the knowledge or the expertise, and we don't have we just don't have the money. So we don't have the money, we don't have the strategic willpower, and we don't have the human capacity. And those, I think, come before anything else, because while we can talk about it, unless somebody's going to put up the money, then how are you going to extract yourself from these big players who are offering great service for competitive prices?
So you're right. And so to be fair, there's something called the value chain community as a concept of, I'll call it an organized group of stakeholders. And then separately, there's the concept of something called a value chain economy, which is just this dynamic notion that
Hmm.
these groups have to somehow cooperate in
Hmm.
a formal, measured model which
Mm.
means that all the groups in theory have to define roles and economic value as well as responsibilities. And so in that architecture or that economic model, every problem you're going to throw out has to at least be looked at that. Much like you would say every solution you want to propose, we should look at it from a trust perspective and say, hey, are the controls in here
Mm.
in place to enable trust on this solution? Well, the same thing with the VCE, the value chain economy. If you don't
Mm.
have that model, in a sense, um, verified, just like you say, verify credentials, if you can't
Mhm.
verify the VCE, you probably don't have anything of value to begin with. And you're correct that in the real world, like we like to pretend, you know,
Mhm.
me and my buddy Donald Trump like to pretend that we control the world,
Mm.
that we can say anything. In reality, look at it this way. They're scared to death of like, oh, what happened with China and the rare earth stuff? I guess we don't control that. So
Mhm.
there's a whole bunch of, even if you're the US or China, you
Mhm.
don't control the world. And the reality is that you're going to have to be successful or do whatever you got to do. There's a certain level of dependency you're going to have on other parties. So you have to have a model that says, how am I going to get the other parties to cooperate or collaborate on something that's important to me? And so
Mhm.
if you're the US, maybe in China, you only have a few things. If you're, Lithuania or Liechtenstein, you've got tons of things that, you don't
Mhm.
control at all.
Yeah.
And, you have to understand, given the dependencies, what is I'll call it the VCE that allows me to have what I call a sustainable model that will be, I'll call it reliable going forward. So it isn't about a one-shot win. It's
Mhm.
more about what's a sustainable architecture that I can put in place around this VCE component that says this will work long term as a relationship and be
Mhm.
adjusted as we go. Things aren't
Mhm.
static either. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And they're
so it
being
makes it
built.
interesting. It means that, every day you pick up the paper, oh yeah, yesterday's news isn't today's news. Something changed. And that's always a challenge for sure.
Yeah. And I think we forget that this is all being, well, we don't, the people are building it are like, yes, we're building it, whereas everybody else feels that they're already behind. If you're trying to, because there's so much money, if you're trying to compete with these big guys, they're far ahead, but they're just starting out the building, and all this money they're investing for all these data centers, that's with a 10, 20, 30-year plan. And I mean, Europe's position is, are we already too far behind, or is there an opportunity for us to even, get in the game, or have we already lost? And
That you're right. You're raising great questions. And the trick to it is there's a process called gaps we go through where we ask the question in a goal setting. But then the second thing we do is we'll assess that and say, is it possible? If not, what's possible? And
yeah.
that concept, we're really asking, to your point, get 10 people in a room
Mm.
and give them the same problem, the same goals, and they're going to have 10 sets of assumptions.
Mhm.
And if you're the judge or the referee, you're going to look and say, "Oh my God, three of those people are like nuts. Their
Mhm.
assumptions are just off the table. They can't possibly happen." The other seven, there's maybe challenges there, but they're at
Mhm.
least assumptions that they're making are something to work on, I'll say, going
Mhm.
forward. Where
Yeah.
maybe three of us are just out to lunch and I'll say, hey, I want Lithuania to control all data centers in the world going forward. Hey, great, Jim. Appreciate the thought. But your assumption is likely not going to be the one that wins, but thanks. Anyway, maybe he'll buy us lunch.
Yeah. Well, no, I think this is all very good insight and helpful um, framing. And are you Jim, in your work, are you using uh, agents or pretend agents with the AI, or
Well, so the
real
funny part
agents?
is I'm lucky. So, all right. So I at some point want to teach a course. It's called Back to the Future in Technology.
Mhm.
So that was a movie, but now I want to make it a course at like MIT or something because everybody assumes all of these problems and all of these solutions are new. And it's like,
Mhm.
whoa, wait a minute. The technologies are different. The context has changed. Those things are different. And because of that, the actual solutions will be different. But what's not different is that these problems have existed for, in some cases, thousands of years. So there's something called promises in architecture, for futures in systems. I was trying to understand that 25 years ago, when nobody had defined it. And I turned around and looked backward and say, oh, wait a minute, somebody invented money, 3000 BC. Oh, that was an elegant problem of, I'll call it future value, as a whole solution. And I took that apart and said, oh my God, that's so much smarter than the digital systems that have come in the last 15 or 20 years on trying to solve, I'll call it futures and promises, those kinds of things in architecture. And so if you actually look at money and all the components that they architected that with, those were much better done. So my theory a lot of times is just to take whatever a proposed solution is or a problem, and then I ask who did this before me better as a
Mhm.
problem statement, and then what their solution strategies were, what their context was, understand the solution, even patterns. Even the patterns can apply going forward, but not the
Yeah.
technologies and the solutions themselves.
Hmm. What did you say about promises for architects? Or
Well, promises, like in Java, we have this concept called a promise or a future. It says here, I'm going to give you something, whatever the something is. You make a request. You
yeah.
ask me, Jim, can you tell me what my tax bill is going to be next year? Great, no problem. That's a request. What I hand you back instead of an answer is I hand you back a promise that says, I will be able to give you an answer as to what your tax bill is, January 1 kind of a thing. So there's a promise or a future. That kind
Hmm.
of stuff is in software architecture everywhere.
Yeah.
But the trick to it was that society had already understood the problem thousands of years earlier. And so for me, it's harvesting. It's like you say, oh, look, Gen AI knows all this crap now because it used Google search to find everything.
Yeah.
Well, before Gen AI was invented, we were doing that ourselves. And in my case, I was just harvesting everybody else's past, not mine, but said, hey, let's go learn from what everybody else has done. And it's all
Hmm.
out there. So
Hmm.
now I can just say, hey, Anthropic, you go look at it. But that's the same concept that we've been doing forever.
Hmm.
So I don't even pretend I'm borrowing. I just tell everybody up front I'm stealing good ideas from everybody I can find.
Hmm. Thank you. Hi, Jim. Welcome. We're just no agenda, and we were going to cancel the meeting, but then we just started talking.
Yeah. Sometimes it's great just to riff. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
well, I was running late and happy to jump in, but I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of the World Bank's new publication, The Agentic State.
Oh, do you have a link?
I do, and I am about to cut and paste it into the chat. And the best part is reading the 104-page vision paper they have that accompanies it on rethinking government in the era of agentic AI.
Oh, excellent. That's a little bit of what we're talking about.
Which, of course, glosses over tough issues like security and privacy and individual identity and selective disclosure and blah, blah, blah. So,
Nice. Excellent. Wow. I'll actually, yeah, put another link as well because you guys are and people are aware of the State of AI report that was released when last week or something.
yeah, matter
And
of fact, I still have it open on my desktop. I haven't read it yet.
yeah, I just read, yeah, read that 300 pages. I did watch the 25-minute overview. So,
Yeah,
um,
much better. I was just going to feed it in the notebook LM anyways.
yes. Um, but yeah. So do we want to talk about that? The agentic state? Do you have anything else to talk about?
Yeah, I kind of skimmed through it because
Yeah.
it is high level. They are a bit repetitive in some of their themes and key points, not to be surprised because it's a high level document.
Mhm.
Um, but I think the most important thing is to just kind of understand thematically where they think the world is going in a techno utopian sort of perspective on agentic structures, as well as legitimately what I thought was cool is that there's quite a few participants in the vision paper that are themselves chief technology or digital officers from countries that are participating in it and what they've done in Australia and Estonia and Kenya and a
Mhm.
few other places. So there's real live examples of improvement in public services and processes. Um, But I think it thus means it's a perfect opportunity for us as ToIP or together with LFDT and DIF and the like to then approach these folks and say, hey, love what you're thinking and what you're doing. Here's what we're thinking about and concerns about the citizen and the individual and digital identity and the like, that need to be taken into account, and what can be, potential solutions.
Awesome. No, thanks. A great find. Thank you for that.
Sure.
That's helpful.
It just popped up in my inbox. I don't remember now where I saw it. So
Yeah.
Well, we may need more agentic AI if we have less employees.
yeah.
They will be the employees.
Well,
And the
what?
paper does kind of address it from that context and saying, hey, there's a number of government services that we need to improve, as well as be able to continue to offer with just the changes in demographics, globally speaking. And this is ways to do it. So,
Yeah. Well, my other reaction, and it's a little bit glib, but if that becomes like if talking to a public servant becomes like talking to a chat bot that you can't talk to a real person, it's going to be a race to the bottom.
Yeah, I think I mean some of the statistics I see, there's definitely a generational gap in terms of who wants to talk to a human being and who wants to talk to a chat bot. And I've seen studies where the youth, they're like, yeah, just get me the answer with the chat bot. I don't want to sit on the
Yeah.
phone waiting for somebody to answer me and then have to talk to somebody.
Well, the irony is that a lot of the chatbots now really sound like they are people, but
Yeah.
you never get an answer out of them because they don't have the answer.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm glad that we're all on this call together because I'm opening up something new. You've heard of the Hall of Fame, like in basketball in Springfield, Mass. They have a Hall of Fame. There's a football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. Jim Mason wants to open up a Hall of Fame for the world's crappiest chatbot in Machias, Maine. And so the deal is every day, to your point, I come into these, I'll call it interactions with oh, different levels of AI agents, chatbots, whatever. And they are, you can rank them in terms of not just accuracy, but efficiency, all kinds of different dimensions. And it's amazing how bad companies fail at this in terms of, I'll call it quality of service and support. And I was lucky, I was just a data architect, but I got to work on something for Apple customer care. And I will say that their system, for what it was worth, was, probably a B plus or an A minus. Not necessarily me. I was just a small piece of a much larger thing. But like when you would talk to Apple to say, "Hey, my iWatch broke, help me out," you were saying, "Hi, this is Roger. How can I help?" But when Roger answered, he recognized right away what your native language was. And he would respond. There were 72 native languages they supported. So that's not the world, but it was a big chunk of the world in like
These real
2017.
people?
What?
Real people?
Bots.
No,
Oh.
AI agents
Oh, wow. Okay.
that were voice agents at the time, and we had voice scientists. Again, I'm just a tech guy, but there were real voice scientists that were optimizing natural language responses, and it wasn't as it is not as elegant as I'll call it these large language models we have today for NLP
Yeah.
that are better, but theirs were really, really good. And what would happen is he'd walk you through, he actually understood your dialogue in one of these 72 languages, and he'd walk you through a set of steps. And when you said, "Hey, I tried these steps and it's still not working," he'd say, "Okay, well, I'll connect you over, to a technician, Eric, who can take the next steps." And now you're talking to Eric, who's a real person.
Right.
But they were able to get like 90 something percent of the calls handled. And most of the time, I think it was like, I don't know, 80 something percent of the time, people thought they were talking to Roger, a
Yeah.
person, not a bot.
Yeah.
But if you asked him, "Hey, did the 49ers win or lose last night?" He wouldn't know that. Do you know what I mean? But the other thing they did beautifully was they built what I call off ramps.
Yeah.
When somebody doesn't know something, kind of like you, Eric, if I ask you a question, who's the tallest NBA player? I need you to come back and say, "Hey, I don't know. Why don't you try asking somebody else?" And most of these bots don't have well-designed off ramps even. That's pretty basic stuff.
All right. Well, they are,
Yeah.
I mean, it's huge, huge business these days, these call centers with AI agents.
Right.
And
And the problem is, if you ask, how do you come up with a question that can actually prove that they are a robot or a human? Because they can just go off and do a search themselves and give you the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Um, that's one of the things that we're working on is, yeah, can we give these agents, um, can we give them credentials and can we prove that they are authorized to speak on the behalf of the company that you're talking to?
Right, right.
Especially if they're doing outbound calls.
Yeah. It's like a
Um,
dynamic watermark.
yeah.
No, that's true for the whole space. How do you know the source? How do you know if it's been generated? And how do you know it's true?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so how do I know you guys are really you? So we always think of the provider side of those conversations as being, some sort of an intelligent agent. In reality, it's the other end, who's also the consumer. That's me, you, and everybody else, can also be an agent. And so in the end of the day, it's not like Eric and I are actually talking at all. It's more like Eric's agent is the provider about maybe data center questions, and I'm the architect for a new service that needs to use a data center. But again, it's not me, it's my agent. So it really winds up in the end being, gee, how do agents deal with each other? And then
Yeah.
separately, how do we connect to them? So the best example in the finance world, think about this, is we have stable coins and cryptocurrencies. At the end of the day, Eric, may be, all his money's in, kroners or pounds or something, and mine's in dollars. And in the middle, we use a cryptocurrency to trade on both ends. And so that's much like I think the AI model is going to wind up, is that you wind up with that CUA, that computer user architecture agent side of it, where in a sense the consumer and the provider are both not people, for
Mm.
what it's worth. And then the gap comes just like in the real world in finance. How do you off ramp that stuff? How does Eric input properly so that his provider agent is, I'll call it, accurately representing what he's supposed to and providing what I call qualified, verifiable references and saying, my scope only goes as far. My agent has to do the same thing. No, I
Mhm.
can't sign a contract with you. I'm just asking questions, whatever. But all of those patterns already exist somewhere else. So it's really just stealing those patterns and reusing them going forward, I'll say.
Hey,
Mm.
Neil's got his hand up.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, talk about unscheduled conversations. I had one on the governance architecture team slot last night with John Phillips. I don't know if you know John. He's with Cezu in Australia, and him and his partner have pretty strong proponents of all sorts of stuff. And we're regaling each other over using AI to help us write some code. And the handoff thing strikes me. So I'm talking to the general chat GPT and it's got 5 or 6 modes, but it's really not a good coder. And I spent 2 days going through it to help me automate some stuff that I had no familiarity with. And it kept getting 90% of the answer right, which means it failed. And constantly iteration. And it just seemed to be randomly trying stuff based on other code it found out, and it's mashing it together. And if I'd been that agent, I would say, I really don't know what I'm doing, but I'm taking all sorts of stuff that I really don't understand, putting it together to see if it solves the problem. Um, so that strikes me as where a handoff model would come in extremely handy, and saying, okay, this is a coding problem beyond my thing. I'm going to hand you over to a pure coding agent, right? And also the recognition that says, okay, you're stumbling trying to give me an answer. Um, we need to try something else here. Eventually got what I was looking for, and it looks fairly reliable, but I'm pretty sure the next time I throw a slightly different curveball at it, it's going to go, and the whole thing's going to collapse, which
Yeah.
is
And so that
a
gets
trial
back
and
to
error
quality.
approach, which is fine, but there is a certain aspect of, uh, as you say, uh, the right parties in the discussion, and chat GPT or whatever else as a general agent needs to have a threshold saying, I'm not answering the question. I need to find someone with more expertise, or whether it's a person or a bot.
Mm.
Yeah,
Because at
good
this
point. But I
point,
think, yeah, trust, quality, and governance, all three are the core of, I'll call it, interacting not with bots, but with me. Can
Mm.
you trust me? Am I operating within whatever bounds of governance? And what level of quality you're getting from me? So those same sort of dimensions apply to any domain, including the one you just brought up. And you're right, it's the quality challenge. And you can see today some are better than others. I ask healthcare questions the other day about knee surgery, and I think it was Gemini kept coming back with like, "Hey, don't trust me. Here's everything I used. Here's, deep mind, all that stuff." It gave me all the resources, but it said, "Don't trust anything I say. I'll give you the inputs and I'll summarize them as best I can, but please, you take responsibility for figuring out if it's worth anything," which was a pretty
Well,
good answer, I thought.
I guess that, yeah, maybe with healthcare, they're starting to say, listen, this is not healthcare advice. This is not financial advice. And maybe they're finally just putting that into the algorithm, because I find it hard to find these chat bots that say I don't know, because
Well,
it
in
becomes
those two domains, though, we have liability laws, right? And so, Google doesn't want to be liable for 50 billion because they said something about knee surgery. But on the other hand, where's the liability law on software? You know what I mean? There isn't anything like that. Every country is heavily regulated on finance and certainly healthcare for sure.
Mm.
Yeah, the point you make about trust, whether or not it's AI or a person, gets at the heart of, the concept of the avatar. In Indian religion, the avatar, the body is the avatar of the spirit. And lots of times people realize that even when we say things as real people in real life, how can you actually trust what they're saying, because they could be lying, and they're using their real person in ways that are at the control of their internal human AI, as human intelligence to do what they want to do. And the same thing is probably true for AI. I thought the experiments that were performed in which I guess OpenAI or some agents were given a project that they were going to be working on, and they were given access to people's emails and facts about the people on this hypothetical project.
Yeah.
And one of the things that came out was an email that says, "I think we don't need to use AI anymore." And that as well as emails that were put in there saying one of the principal investigators was cheating on their wife, and the AI agent actually threatened the guy,
Blackmail, yeah.
blackmailed the agent to don't not shut me down, or I'm going to tell you, So that's we're in the 2001 Space Odyssey, open the pod bay doors, Hal. Oh, I can't do that, Dave.
All
It's
right.
crazy.
Yeah.
It's going to be we're just at the threshold of this, and it's governance on these things. If we think we can govern people, we're kind of crazy. But how are we going to govern AI agents? It's it's going to be wild.
Well, and so to your point, with the technology, right, we're in the early stages of the technology itself, but two, understanding how to use and manage it better, obviously. But one cool experiment that I think I should try next year, after I do a little more on the technical end, is I want to say we now have the ability to, in a sense, listen to you and understand more about you through conversation, whatever, and not necessarily direct inputs. So think of, Jeff, in your case, somebody says, "Well, I want to know everything about Jeff Braswell." Well, I can talk to him, but oh, wait a minute. He was in these meetings and he, whatever. There's a bunch of other sources I can go to really understand you. So if I wanted to create an agent that represented a lot of your capability, I could say, well, I could either directly get it from you through interaction, or I could use
Yeah,
these indirect resources, legal or not, and say, okay, he did this, whatever. And I can collect that stuff and say, I think I can create an agent that's like Jeff. So my theory was for next year, what I should do is just go collect all the information on Elon Musk and then create 10 replicas and say, okay, go out and make me money. And hopefully
well,
by the end of
yeah.
next year, I'll have a decent bank account. That's the
I
theory.
think he's probably doing that himself.
Well, right. He wants to replicate himself. I'm just saying, why wouldn't I use AI to replicate him 10 times and see what I can come up with?
Yeah. Well, the deep fakes are already happening. I mean, it's pretty
Yep.
amazing. The real that's a real issue in terms of just the impact on the culture and the society, because with fraudulent statements and things that are being said on behalf of people with deep fakes, the technology is so
Yeah,
good.
you're right. And that does get back. I mean, again, that leads right back to trust over IP and that, the content provenance and all of that stuff is critical.
Yeah.
So you're right. Almost nothing is trustworthy now without better verification, of course.
I think that's why the verifiable LEI is good, because it's actually a trusted credential that's issued by a company that purports to know their employees or officers.
Yeah, exactly. Much like your internet domain name has your rather certificates. are issued by those root CAs in a sense. It's that same concept with registries for sure.
Yeah, except there's a weakness there because the way that they authenticate is by calling up sources. And I had somebody that worked for me a while back, in the previous century actually, and we're doing some work for network solutions, and they had to have access to some, you know, my contractor that was had to get access and to say he was working. And because I wasn't available, he masqueraded himself as me to approve himself, and that to the certificate authority. And so there, you have to have, I think, more immediate knowledge. It's like KYC of your own credential in some sense. That's
Yeah, and so I would say I don't trust anybody. And that was from 25 years ago when they gave my son two social security numbers in the US. So he didn't ask for two, they gave him two. And when I contacted Social Security and said, hey, I only want this one, I don't want the other one, they said, oh, we have no way to correct that because we never thought anybody'd ever have two.
Guys,
So,
we're over time.
yeah.
It's
yeah.
been a really brilliant discussion. I've taken some notes and posted on the wiki. And obviously there'll be the recording. I'm going to head, but obviously there's no reason for anyone to disappear from the call. Take care, guys. And I think we'll miss next week, won't we? Because it's
IIW.
IIW.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
That's great.
Thanks,
Great
everybody.
insights from everybody.
Much
Very
Yeah,
appreciated.
appreciated.
take care, guys. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody. Bye bye.